Ready to challenge what you think? Every week on Rise Radio Podcast, we ignite powerful dialogue about belief, social narratives, prophecies, and spirituality. Grounded in biblical apologetics with expert guests, bold questions, and unexpected insights. We aim to contextualize our culture and bring clarity. This isn't about small talk. It's big questions answered. Rise Radio Podcast. Let the truth rise.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Rise Radio Podcast. You can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and on our landing page, which is at rseonline.org, all one word. And this podcast exists to try and share the discernment and concerns about the generation and the culture that we're in, but to also plant seeds of the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is our only solution to what we see unfolding in the world. So there's a concern recently about the rise in ecumenicism. It portrays a counterfeit uniting and oneness with false gospels, and this is something we're going to touch on over the next few weeks, both on the podcast and on the YouTube videos. We are joined by Stephen Montgomery, author of the Converging Apostasy. Stephen, I'm going to ask you first, are you concerned about the rise of ecumenicism as it pertains to the new Apostolic Reformation?
Yeah, it just in general, you can easily see how ecumenicalism, it's like you're drawing in, it's like big tent politics where, oh yeah, we'll accept you. And you start to hear that in the NAR through folks like Cindy Jacobs. We cannot, I'm just totally paraphrasing, we cannot move ahead or expect God to work fully until we have complete unity between Catholics, I think she said Russian Orthodox and evangelicals. Well, that's kind of an interesting statement, isn't it? But the thing is that Solovyov also said that, and which pope was it? One of the popes said he was the most admired for his ecumenical spirit. His way of looking at stuff. So, yeah,
because we're actually seeing some of the new Apostolic Reformation leaders getting increasingly involved in politics. Like, for example, you've got Paula White, who is involved in the faith office at the White House now.
My book could be added to like daily, as you can imagine. So the things I have about Paula White and her connection to the NAR, they're already dated because it's like one of the last podcasts I did with John Collins, we were talking about Paula White and the fact that she is offering $1,000. No, excuse me. If you give $1,000 to a ministry, you will receive a personal angel. So if you look at the writings of Martin Luther in the Reformation, you'll get something about buying and selling spiritual gifts. It doesn't really work that way. And she obviously is not aware of that, or could care less, who knows. But yeah, that's a big problem.
And we're certainly seeing a lot more polarization when it comes to the left and the right in politics. Do you see this convergence being any way related to the shift to a harder and harder right in politics?
Yeah, that's another one. It's sort of like by baby steps, but put it this way, if I can do it succinctly. Going all the way back to Jane Lead and then traversing through the Lateran prophets and then on to the NAR. But the NAR folks are trying to be more careful to step around this. Jane Lead very specifically says, even if the Spirit reveals something contrary to the Word of God, you must continue with the Spirit because It's not as if he's stopped revealing new truth. Okay, so you see that with Bill Britton, clearly, and he'll state it similarly to that. George Warnick, he says, the realm of the spirit is not static, but it's exciting and new. And Bill Britton says, God is faithful to reveal new and exciting revelations in the end times. So that kind of idea of ongoing, moving on to greater and greater revelation. One of the themes in my larger book, Converging Apostasy, is that of anti-Semitism and race. Okay, so you can find that kind of, there's a thread that runs all the way back to precedents set by Valentinus, then through Blavatsky and Bailey and the occultic world. Well, guess what? It also, because of the idea of ongoing revelation within the so-called Christian right, they have gone on to new revelations about race. And I'm not just talking about people that is part of their upbringing or their society in the South, say like KKK style. No, this is actually folks who somehow believe, or they want others to believe, that the Spirit of God has revealed to them that white is good, brown, black, everything else is not, the way it should be. So there's a lady, I forget it right, Viola Larson discovered the same thing that I was finding out, and it was produced where Christian Research Institute or the Spiritual Counterfeits. And what it talks, Viola Larson's her name, what it talks about is because of this idea of ongoing revelation, what's the latest thing? What's the latest trend, right, in revelation? That people from the latter rain have taken that next big step on into what some people call Christian identity. Christian identity movement they're not necessarily charismatics or latter rain folks, though some have come from that route. They are the kind of folks that might show up at, say, a rally of some sorts and want to engage in physical violence. They also are the kinds that are proclaiming that in the end of days, they will rise up as a force together and cleanse the country of all the evildoers, which mostly they think are Jews. And so, yeah, that kind of bleeds in, as you can imagine, into neo-Nazi stuff. So it's just kind of like, how far do you want to go with this stuff, right?
Yeah, and we certainly see a shift in that online as well, in certain niche circles where people are being drawn in to these ideas and these extremities. And in fact, it reminds me in the book of Revelation that the dragon will pursue the woman who is interpreted as Israel. Yep.
In my personal readings, I try to just read whatever from the Bible in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, I try to circulate. I just go, okay, Matthew, and I'll just keep going through Revelation, and I'll start over, just to kind of try to keep everything fresh. But recently read the one that says, there will even come a time when they will kill you and think they're doing a service to God. Okay, so some people try to interpret that as, well, yeah, look what they did. Nero and all those bad Roman emperors, they did try to kill him. Well, I think you can apply that to what these folks are claiming they will do. I can't promise it's that way because I'm not a prophet. So I'm not going to say that is the word of Stephen Montgomery, because I wouldn't dare to even try that. But yeah, that goes also, just something that hops into my mind about that is back to Solovio. He had a short book, which was neither pro or anti, but it's called A Short Story of Antichrist. And so the way he describes it is kind of interesting. He says that there would be a leader who unites. That's the ecumenical thing. He will unite all people and bring peace and cooperation between the nations. But then he will turn evil and he will instigate people to have these great celebrations in which they kill those that are opposed to him. Okay, so this is all yo, and so you have to take him in context. There's a lot of stuff I couldn't tell you that quickly about him. But if I take a very quick sidetrack, because the manifestation of the sons of God is mentioned in 8th chapter of Romans. Okay, so what is it? People interpret it a lot of different ways. The folks that are into this movement, and I'm saying the Christian side, say that's the time of perfection. Okay. What does that mean? Do you sit out in a commune and wait to be manifest as the Son of God, as some people did? No, what happens to be one of those deep, and it's like in the deep end of all these sonship teachings is this. They say, no, what it's really talking about is the sons of God in the heavenlies will be made manifest. Interesting, because if you take that step, then what you're doing is you're duplicating or running parallel to the idea that Alice Bailey said about the externalization of the hierarchy. You see, so both of you have one on the right side, one on the left, but they're essentially talking about this upcoming moment of divinization, essentially, followed by a sacred purge, essentially. And so to point that out, sometimes people, if they haven't read it, but if you've read enough Alice Bailey, you can see, oh yeah, that's what it is. Okay, so how does that relate to even vaguely to Christianity other than Romans 8? Well, what they really, really like to do, and this is where they say, oh, we're always getting accused of being spiritists and spiritualists. Yeah, you are. And here's why. Because they take, Hebrews, what chapter? 11, 12, 13, somewhere in there. They take Hebrews and they talk about the great cloud of witnesses. So here we have this great cloud of witnesses. The spirits of just men made perfect, who await in the heavenlies to be made manifest through the corporate body here on earth, thus perfecting them, empowering them to do what they got to do as far as hands-on eschatology goes. If you're looking on the Alice Bailey side, the idea is that as things progress and get closer to the reappearance of the Christ, there will be the spiritual hierarchy becoming externalized in the physical realm. Okay, so if you go back in history, what you find is that this kind of talk does begin with Valentinus. And there's a word that your folks, or our folks at this point, can look up. It's called theurgy, Thedurgy. And so that's the position that says, and think NAR, you think everything I just said about manifestation, sons of God, externalization, hierarchy, but think NAR. Theurgy means calling down, commanding, channeling, or receiving bodily a higher spirit, an elevated, it's more evolved kind of being. Well, on the Christian side, they might say, well, yeah, the angels in heaven, they're more evolved than us. And the great cloud of witnesses, they would go for this. And I'm speaking very, not in the way they would talk about it, because I'm trying to hurry it up a little bit, but that's essentially what it is. And so I ran this by a scholar named Bridget Jacobs, no relation to Cindy Jacobs. And I pointed out the teachings of Royal Cronquist, one of these followers of Jane Lead, who is a prophet in the latter rain. And she pointed me to one of his teachings, which I was unaware of. And she said, see, check this out. Because Royal Cronquist was essentially a Neoplatonist. What did Neoplatonists do? Well, right around the time, lots of words here. right about the time of one of their leaders named Iamblichus. At about that time, they stopped thinking about perfection as, say, like the seed of divinity inside you. And Iamblichus started talking about, no, it's from outside of you. You call it down to you. And so if you look at St. Jacobs and these guys in the NAR, they really love this idea of commanding God. God has to follow his laws, and I will tell him what to do now. That's not really far from all these folks. So for Valentinus, he would say literally, you're receiving in your bridal chamber. People get kind of off on Mike Bickle for his discussion of that, but it's been around for a long time. So in the second century, Valentinus says the way you become perfect is that you bodily receive your personal bridegroom spirit in the bridal chamber. Okay, this is perfection, sinlessness for him. So if you move that up a few hundred years, then you get the Neoplatonists like Iamblichus, similar talk. Then you go up to the latter rain, you get Jane Lead. Now, I've been referring back to her, but now's the way to get to the perfection thing. How do you become perfect? Well, if you ask Jane Lead and read enough of her writings as I have, you find out that she says, spirits of light will descend and enter into bodily vehicles to make them all godified as Christ, meaning multiple Christs. Spirits of light descending into your body. You might see that on a creepy movie sometime, sci-fi kind of movie or whatever. Well, guess what? Bill Britton says that in much depth, he's more deft and more subtle about the way he says it. He describes it as God's two armies, one in the heavenlies, one on earth. They will come into union, and this will be the consummation of the ages. So yeah, they kind of get that icky sexualized language from the esoteric world. Go to Royal Cronquist. He says it so explicitly. I'll see if I can paraphrase. Okay, in his writings, which went up to about 1994 until he passed away, he calls them epistles of the kingdom because he's assuming that all of them are prophecies God is speaking through him. So he says they, capitalize, will tabernacle within us, and they will do this spirit, soul, and body. And he calls them the great cloud of witnesses. So you see, you have like at least three angles to this. Well, if you count Valentinus on the esoteric side, which is easy enough, you get two main sides. So it's kind of like a snake with two heads coming at you from two directions. Now, the idea of a converging apostasy is saying, well, they either are already connected, or it looks like there's baby steps in that direction to where they would be connected. But there you have it. I mean, it's made its way into the teachings of latter rain folk through Jane Lee.
So do you think these are real spirits?
Personally, I think whether they are or aren't is really not for me to decide. But here's what I would say is, I would say if somebody is anticipating this experience, like what they say, the Feast of Tabernacles, that's when the spirits tabernacle in your body. If they're waiting for this to happen, and they pull this, which a lot of times happens with deceivers. They say, well, why hasn't it happened? I mean, we're doing everything God wants us to do. Now's the time. Then some new teacher would come along, and they'll kind of revamp it a bit, just like the NAR revamped Taking Dominion. They call it 7 steps, obviously. So they revamp this idea of receiving spirits and maybe just say, okay, whatever, we're perfect now. Let's rule and reign. Let's carry out the sacred purge. So whatever it is, like whatever would happen inside your mind if you thought this was going to occur, it's an ideological go ahead to fulfill all the other things. And it's obviously a real big perversion of scripture. And to me, it's just like about as blasphemous as you can get.
Yeah, the power of suggestion and all of these psychological tactics that are used to manipulate people.
I just don't, because I've seen so many people claim that this is going to happen now and it didn't happen and yada yada. I just wait and I say, I like the fact that Jesus said, no one knows the hour or the timing of these things, right? So he says, not the angels, it's God alone, the Father, who knows the timing of things.
Yeah, and there's warnings about these things in the New Testament, in books like 2 Peter, about commanding angels and that kind of presumption.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how they claim to be, really having their noses into the scriptures. I'm surprised they don't read those things. So.
Well, it's a very Gnostic thing, isn't it? You mentioned Valentinus. It's a trait of Gnosticism for people to see themselves as above their station, with this kind of spiritual pride and everything that comes with it, salvation by knowledge. And in the end, like in 2 Peter and the book of Jude, it talks about this kind of spiritual presumption where people deceptively think that they can actually command angels.
It is. And I can tell you that of the 10 themes that I'd look at, there's no need to list them all right now, but of the 10 themes I look at in the Converging Apostasy, I believe Valentinus fulfills all of them, or promoted all of them, and then going through the critiques, I don't try to force feed stuff to make it match all 10. I'll say that some of these folks maybe fulfill 5, 6, 7 of the themes, but there is a running thread, and I think of it as sort of the part that propels all these other themes. They're all subsets, and that is the theme of becoming divine. Okay, so you're going back to the Garden of Eden, right? There's the beginning of the problems that have occurred to humanity. And so I think I call it something long-winded, like deification based on the original lie, or something like that.
You shall be as God.
Yes. So yeah, I'll just have those subtopics for each of the folks that I critique. So I have one on Valentinus. Then I think of Aleister Crowley, although he's quite far removed historically. I'll put him as like a bookend to Valentinus. If I can try this really quick, David, I'll see if I can do it. And you'll see how this can go into Hitler's ideas. This can go any kind of philosophy that could be dangerous. Valentinus essentially had the same sacraments as the rest of the church in his day. He was really hoping to be the bishop. And I don't want to say it wrongly. I think he was an Alexandrian, so he's essentially an Egyptian. He wanted to be bishop. He barely missed. And so, writers like Tertullian, church fathers, would say that he had a vengeance, a revenge to have on the church. So he has the main sacraments, but he adds 2. One is called, so here we go, the bridal chamber. That's where you get all this. You get that from, actually, even people that preceded him would talk about hierogamos, which is like, a stand-in for a priest and priestess will engage in actual intercourse, and they think that that somehow manipulates the gods to give them good crops, stuff like that. So yeah, he had the bridal chamber, which obviously is not a sacrament for the rest of Christendom. So what he got out of that was, one, that was the time of receiving, of letting in, and yes, he has sexualized comments, of letting in the bridegroom spirit, and that would bring about perfection. But it also brings about this idea of a kind of like a spiritism thing. Okay, his other new thing that he brought to the sacraments, he called it, what did he say? Well, essentially what it was that he was acting like it was a restoration of your position in Christianity, what he thought was Christianity. But what it did was you renounced Jehovah. Okay, so that actually is one of my themes. I call it the devil reborn. How would you get anybody to think the devil's good, right? So he said, Jehovah's not the good guy. And he'd say the other part connected with that was, of course, the Jews who followed Jehovah. Now we have a precedent set for some sort of perfectionism tied with some sort of spiritism. And then you have this anti-Semitic sort of thing. And going along with that, it's almost like by default, it falls into this idea, which you see so readily with Blavatsky and others, excuse me, of they're more either satanic or they call themselves Luciferian. But that can easily be shown to be, if not directly from Valentinus, just some of the other people he influenced,
Yeah, you're describing the demiurge, right? Where they have this belief that the God of the Old Testament, quote unquote, is a lesser being and a violent and oppressive God and different to the New Testament. I know that there was a heresy called Marcionism around the time of the early church where they would separate the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament and claim that they were different. But essentially, well, actually that's something that I sadly fell into a number of years ago when I was kind of influenced by Gnostic views. But yeah, it's basically the demiurge they're describing, right?
Yeah, and David, since you brought that up, I was going to kind of skip it, but something very odd happened with all of this is Valentinus describes, first off, before that, the esoteric world cherry picks from Valentinus. So Blavatsky doesn't teach straight up cosmology of Valentinus. He picks stuff out of his ideas. And the same would go with Alice Bailey and others. That is something that you can see today with, purely satanic folks. There's one group that's called the Church of Azuzel. And then there's one that's, I know where I was going with that. Okay. So Valentinus, in his writings, you have this strange connection with a being or principle called Sophia. Okay, so of course in the Bible, Sophia and the Greek language, it means wisdom. So, but check out the way Valentinus and those who followed him and tried to cherry pick him, they say this: Sophia was plunged out of the heavenlies for longing to be like God, or longing to look into his secrets, or even lusting after God. So if you remember scriptures, I saw Lucifer fall like lightning. Okay. So they're kind of fulfilling Valentinus, his ideas are completely fulfilling that and running parallel to that. And so he calls her Sophia. Now, what happened later in, say, if we go way fast forward all the way to Jane Lead, she doesn't say that through some Bible study she got her ideas. She does claim to be highly influenced by Jacob Boehme and John Portage, who had similar mindsets. They were really into angels and magic and astrology and Kabbalah. But what she counts as her initial revelation to follow all these ideas, she called Sophia the great goddess, the spouse of God, the wonder of wonders. She had a lot of different names. She called them literally God's Holy Virgin. She'd have these different phrases for it. But she claims that she was in the forest, really, really trying to pray hard and learn what she needed to learn. And she'd get these headaches, and then suddenly this beautiful woman appeared to her, and that was, to her, was Sophia.
Wow.
And Sophia said some mumbo jumbo, and it's kind of like the Mormons, right? Like with the angel appearing to Joseph. She says apparently she said, "Take good heed to thy mother's counsel, and I will open unto you the secrets of revelation." So yeah, throughout Jane Lead's writing, she refers to this. Now, you don't run into that, at least I haven't found it openly, with the Latter Rain folks who borrowed from Jane Lead. But it's interesting that you do find it in other, like I said, openly satanic groups. This Church of Azazel, they say that the true name for Lucifer is actually Sophia. If you ever watched the movie, I think Tom Hanks starred it, what was it, the Da Vinci Code. There's this Baphomet, and it's translated to Sophia. Baphomet is another word for the devil, for Lucifer. And so that kind of stuff, that kind of parallel thought going through the ages, it just kind of raises questions like, okay, well, how did that come about? But yeah, for sure, Jane Lead had that idea, and also went into, there's another guy. He is one of those ones that's he denies that the Holocaust came. He says that there will be a Sophietic purge, which will require human participation. Oh, so it's not like we're going to pray to Sophia and she's going to help us out and gain wisdom. No, there's going to be a purge of the earth, and it will be in accordance with her. Or then you get in Jane Lead's writings, and just about everybody in the esoteric world, they say that she is able to present herself as male or female. And you find that in Kabbalah also. It's just, it's like rampant all over the place, that concept. All the way back to Plato, you get that kind of stuff. So if I can hop over to another little spot over there that I talked to you earlier about Vladimir Solovyov in Russia. Very influential. He knew Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, and they admired him. He's quite an intellectual. He did lectures and so on, and did a lot of writings. Supposedly, other than studying the writings of Valentinus, that could be one where you get some of these ideas, and Kabbalah, and I left out one, Emanuel Swedenborg. He studied his stuff. Soloviev also said that he had 3 encounters with a being called Sophia, and he described her as all the beauty of feminine beauty, just a wonder, and that in his mind, she led him almost like what in Christian circles we would say, Holy Spirit leads us in all truth. She led him, probably like a ring through his nose, to all the untruth that he found. So he has this he has this claim that he was in a library trying to learn more about stuff, and he says it's almost as if he was taken step by step, and everywhere he went, he found her again being presented. So it's like if he's doing going through all the esoteric world, well, yeah, he probably would run into her again and again, because Valentinus would be one spot, and the feminine, masculine versions that you get from Kabbalah and so on.
Yeah, and some of them falsely claim that she is the Holy Spirit as well, right? So
yeah, yep.
So it's like their counterfeit version, and I've seen some people drawn in by those lies and deceived as well. So easily done in this time when so much of this is around. But I mean, the goddess figure is nothing new, is it? There's been the presence of a false goddess figure throughout history in many different cultures, through Rome and Greece, Babylon, and various others. So there's nothing new under the sun.
Yep.
But it reminds me also, in the book of Revelation, the harlot is drunk on the blood of the saints.
I don't know if that's like a future reference, if it's an all-time reference all the time that that's happening, but the drunk on the on the blood of the saints.
And the false religion is harlotry, spiritual harlotry, isn't it? So
yeah, and one of the things that always strikes me, whether either somebody talks about that or if I read it for myself, is how many of the folks that were really, really your movers and your shakers in the latter rain movement, they would take things like they'd say, "Come out of her, don't be a part of Babylon." Well, essentially, what they were telling folks, excuse me, is if you want to go there, they're saying, "Come out of the faith that was once delivered." It's like a complete inversion. Yep.
yeah, it reminds me of the verse, is it from Isaiah, that says they turn everything upside down, light for darkness, darkness for light, sweet for bitter, and bitter for sweet.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one of the guys that I did talk to, now this was back in the day when cell phones were not there and personal computers were not there yet. But I talked to several times to the initial head apostle of the latter rain movement. His name was I mentioned George Houghton. So that was one of his big things. He would talk about constantly, come out. Don't be a part of the destruction. But there was something else I was going to tell you about that. But yeah, that whole thing, it's astounding how they'll take things and just invert them.
And we have that book by Bill Johnson and Lance Wallnau, which is called Invading Babylon. So do you think that that's some of the contradiction behind it, that they claim to be defeating Babylon, but essentially it's just part of the problem itself?
Yes, I would say Invading Babylon has a couple of aspects to it. One is like so many of these fellows in the latter rain movement who were teaching, I usually say that the latter rain movement spawned the manifest sons of God doctrines. But so many of them will say that very thing. They'll say, in the personal sense, get out of there. You shouldn't be there. It's all going to fall down on your head. And then in the societal sense, they'll say, it's all coming down. It's going to collapse. So whether it's personal or in a bigger sense, the come out from among her, come out from among them and do not be a part of the judgment that's coming.
So do you think they want to bring down this system in order to create a new age?
That is, I think, by the way you're asking that, you've heard something about it. Yeah. If this is an answer or not, something that didn't make the cut in my book, because I so recently found out and studied it a little bit more. But I did a podcast about it with John Collins. is the accelerationist. Okay. So you've got folks that I would say some of them are probably, I guess they qualify as pseudo-intellectuals, because how could you have such crazy ideas and still consider yourself on this, But sure, you have people like Steve Bannon and Evola, and well, the whole idea of we need to bring down all of the systems of the world, so that we out of the ashes will come the new. And actually, there John was really quick looking up something. I just kind of in the back of my mind, I said, John, I think I've heard somewhere where Steve Bannon says that he's actually more of a Leninist than anything else. He wants to see the destruction of everything. And then out of that Kali Yuga, he would bring in the age of Aquarius. And so John quickly gets on his one of his other computers and he reads out the article to me in real time. I said, "Oh, that's pretty good." So yeah, he did the quick research, but sure enough, accelerationists had this idea that they think society's tilting, it's about to go over the cliff, and so they would like to do anything to help it out, because they think there's no way to fix it. So they just need to destroy it in order to bring in the new.
Well, to some people that might look quite heroic, as if the movement is saving the world from something bad. So that could be quite deceptive, right?
It is, especially when you can do it on the cover of folks that have some credentials, and they are in some sense actual intellectuals, and they sound like it, they write like it, but they come to conclusions that are just wrong as can be. Well, and you look at that at any society that's had similar problems. There were extremely intelligent people backing the Third Reich, and you got apologists for every inconceivable kind of idea that there is. Well, I don't know if you heard this quote, but this is from Alice Bailey. Oh, yeah, she uses a lot of like pseudonyms and tries to innuendo. She says certain methods of release and modes of abstraction will be applied to death and dying. This will be regarded as soul withdrawal, and as a process of liberation and release. Well, that's on the individual level. And then you get people that are like Ruth Montgomery, thankfully not related to me. She kind of mirrors this and says things like, well, a lot of people they don't want to hang around on Earth. They'll just decide to get it over with and move on to the next realm in the spirit. So, but Betty also says this. She says, there have been great and outstanding personalities. So if anybody has any kind of ideas that, oh no, she was just all about light and the new age and all this wonderful stuff, she lists them as one, the people who inspired the French Revolution, maybe Robespierre. Two, Mussolini, the regenerator of his people. Three, Hitler, who lifted distressed people upon his shoulders. Lenin, the idealist, and Stalin and Franco. They were all leaders who acted as expressions of certain little understood energies. Now, I would say it's pretty easy to understand their energies, And so, again, it's that reframing. Is
like revisionism. Yeah, it's like you've got this whole dilemma today in some people's minds where they feel like they've been lied to about some of the world events in history. And it kind of pushes a few people to get this unhealthy level of suspicion to the point where they start to reframe and revise even things like what happened in 1930s Germany, to the point where they turn it on its head and start to say that actually the leader of Germany during that time, that of course committed some heinous atrocities, that he is actually seen as the hero in some of these niche groups. The implications of that are scary.
Yeah. Yep. And this scary thing, I was talking about this with my wife and some folks at Sunday school class that I attend, is the deep fake thing and the artificial intelligence generated messages that are applying to the very thing you just said, being able to be revisionist, to say, oh, no, they got that all wrong. What you need to really hear is yada, yada, and they tell you what you need to hear.
Yeah, and of course, Adolf, the leader of that regime, was into the occult as well, wasn't he?
I've heard people say different things, like when you get with scholars. Unfortunately, there's something, I really hate to say this. I don't really call out scholars because they would call me out easier than I could call them out. But the thing is, sometimes if you're reading a scholarly text, book, article on whatever topic, they'll be so located in the minutia that they can't clearly state anything. They're kind of revolving around defining such phrase and so on. So I've read some people who should know and basically do know about the Third Reich, but they're not really willing to put their foot down anywhere because there's been other scholars who have already said, no, that can't be. They have to live within the scholarly community.
So do you think the New Apostolic Reformation and the Latter-day Reign and where all of this movement came from, do you think that their ultimate goal is to establish a kingdom now on the earth as like a post-millennial theocracy? Or actually, some people say that the better word would be ecclesiocracy, kind of like a rule of the church before Jesus Christ returns. Do you think that that's their ultimate goal?
Yeah, it's a complex question, but the easy answer is yes. How I would qualify it is just to say that the way I put it in my book is I say, like in math, you have an order of operations. So I say the order of operations, their quote, hands-on eschatology is such that they're both awaiting the arrival of whomever returns first. Okay, so if you look at scripture, then it's not really Christ who arrives first. There's this buildup or, devolution into all the big time problems that we've been warned about. And then Christ returns. So, yeah, and I really haven't studied myself thoroughly all the different versions of millennialism. But the way I look at it mostly is that I've seen the Apostle John, and then he's got some real good credentials in the people that followed his idea. And he was a premillennialist, and I don't think rapture was really introduced that much. But the idea, fairly simply, would be that it gets worse,
Yeah.
and Christ arrives, and then he's the one that sets all things straight, and his kingdom is begun.
And if this is linked to Alice Bailey, who is called the Mother of the New Age, she wrote a book called The Reappearance of the Christ. And that Christ that is being referred to there, that isn't even the real biblical Jesus Christ anyway, is it? It's like a New Age Maitreya.
No. And somebody, I didn't mention him by name, but he's, just like you've got some guiding lights, the New Age, I would say Alice Bailey is pretty much the top. But in Christian identity, the guiding light for a lot of their, if you want to call it theology, is Wesley A. Swift. And so he did what a lot of people have done, is he tries to coincide the discovery of the lost books of the Bible. A lot of that was occurring right around 1948, slightly earlier, but as far as the works were published and studied, it really comes out to be 1948. Well, it just so happens that 1948 is when Bailey put out Externalization of the Hierarchy, and 1947 was the reappearance of the Christ. Now, I don't really go for like these grand coincidences. Like I heard somebody, it was almost like a little bit mawkish. They were saying, well, George Washington had this and John F. Kennedy had this. And they were kind of like making these comparisons. Almost it's mystical. It just happened that way. But I do have a short section in my book where I say very street language. I say, so what's up with 1948? And I'm sure that I left out some things that anybody who reads it would say, yeah, and also this happened. But you get some obvious stuff like, Israel becoming a state in 1948. You got the Latter Rain movement starting, and when they started, they called it the New Order of the Latter Rain, is what they called it. After a while, they dropped the New Order part of it. There's a lot of I don't know if they're coincidences or not, but an awful lot of stuff just seems to line up. And so, I look at it as things running parallel to where if the NAR and that side were to become so thoroughly esotericized, if you want to put it that way, and then the Bailey camp kind of continues the way they are, then they would both be set up and primed to receive whoever returns first to establish the kingdom and, of course, purge out the folks that don't really fit their idea of a kingdom people.
Thank you. Yeah, and I know that there are many that have been caught up by these things. The appeal to it can be quite alluring, and it can seem like it's right, but in actual fact, it's almost right. Essentially, it's wrong because it's a mixture of some New Age philosophies and mysticism with some Christian language, and quite often it can be quite militarized. If you listen to some of the statements, I'm making a video about this soon on the Rise YouTube channel, which is going to show some of that kind of military, that draw to militarization in these groups, and it's definitely very concerning. So, thank you, Stephen Montgomery. I really appreciate you coming on today. Where can people find you online? Is it just on the Amazon?
Right now I just have the Amazon thing, and a lot of podcasts that I've done with John Collins at William Branham Research. We cover some of the same ideas, and like I said, I can't really keep the book updated on a daily basis. But there's a lot of good things that you can hear over there too.
Great, Stephen. Thank you very much for coming on. And we'll be speaking to Stephen again at some point soon in the next few weeks on the Rise Radio podcast, where he wants to share his concerns about the so-called deliverance movements within the hyper-charismatic NAR circles. But for now, that's the end of this episode. Thank you for joining us, everyone, and please do continue to listen each week as we discuss the latest in world events and biblical apologetics.
Are you searching for a podcast that discusses the most important issues of our day, all from a Christian perspective? Then add Rise Radio to your podcast playlist. Rise Radio explores topics that are shaping our world: philosophies, social narratives, belief systems, prophecies, strange phenomena, as well as spirituality. No topic is off limits. Rise Radio is about sharing the good news of Jesus Christ across the planet. Listen now on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, Buzzsprout, and wherever you get your podcast. Rise above the noise. Discover the truth. Tune into Rise Radio on your favorite podcast player right now.